So my name is Jens Østergaard, and some of you might have met me before during a training, CSM or CSPO or something. And we have me and Stig has worked on how, what can we tell about the new Scrum Guide compared to the older one. I was one of the first Scrum Masters in Denmark, maybe the first even, and has been training a lot, certifying and coaching for many years in Scrum now. And it's been a pleasure to see this journey. Also how Scrum changed over the years. There are some, over the years it's changed quite a bit. But we're going to mainly focus on the difference between 2017 Scrum Guide and the 2020 Scrum Guide. Stig?
Yeah, I'm Stig Efsen. I live in Aarhus, Denmark. I've been living Agile Scrum for many years. I first met Jeff, I think 2008 or 9, and I started teaching a little bit with him, Scrum courses, and also met Jens, and we developed a CSPO course together. So I'm a CSM, CSPO, CSP, and whatever within Scrum. So I've been doing Scrum for quite some years, both small and large projects. Been doing Scrum for up to maybe 25 developers in Scrum of scale, at so on. So that's my qualification for being here, and I'll also translate the Scrum Guide to Danish, different guides that have been over the time, and also do some Scrum with Ken Swaber some years ago. So that's my experience, makes me sit here. And while we talk about experience and why we sit here, I think it's fair to say that we do not represent the Scrum Guide. We have our own opinions. So this is our experience, Jens as a trainer and me as Scrum Master and coach. So maybe we will not say the right words, but you can read the guide afterwards.
Okay, and the agendas we had a welcome to GOTO and a short presentation here. We have 15 slides that we have done. Well, this is one of the slides though. So we have 15 slides to go through. Our estimate is that it takes about half an hour, but as you all know, estimates are estimates and not commitments. So, it might go, a little bit quicker or might go a bit faster. And then we have Q&A, and based on the experience on the webinar, there's usually a lot of Q&A. And since there's a large audience here, I think we're probably up to almost 100 now, participants. So we should expect. But as Oliver said, if you can hold on to your questions until after the presentation would be good. Okay, so starting on this here now, Scrum, this is from Scrum Inc., this drawing here. So Scrum is still Scrum. There's not, the devil's in the detail, as Ken Schwaber once told me. It's still the 3 roles, even though you focus more on the accountabilities now and not so much on the roles. You can still say roles, but it focus more on the accountabilities. We still have the 5 events, and the 3 artifacts. It's the same. We also have the backlog refinement meeting, which is not a meeting and it's not an event, but still there somehow, a little bit strange. So we will probably go into details here where there are the differences from 2017 and what you might want to look for and take home as change evolves. Scrum evolves, and it's a very big difference from 20 years ago, how Scrum has evolved. Scrum is still Scrum when it comes to the values. The values are still the same. We have the commitment, we have the focus, openness, respect, courage. The pillars, still transparency. You have to have transparency. If you have transparency, then you can inspect. And if you can inspect, that means you can adapt if you see if something is not as it used to be. So that's what we do in sprint planning. That's what we do in the daily Scrum. That's what we do in the sprint review. That's what we do in the retrospective. Stig, you have anything to add?
No, I think it's still Scrum, as you say. So
Scrum is still Scrum, yeah. One of the new things that is here in the new Scrum guide is that they define what they mean by a product. So this is how it's defined in the Scrum. Now, a product is a vehicle to deliver value. It has a clear boundary, known stakeholders, well-defined users or customers. A product could be a service, a physical product, or something more abstract. So this actually makes it very flexible what is a product. I mean, you could have because you have the tradition of what is a product. There's been loads of discussion on this over the years. Is Microsoft Office a product? Is Microsoft Word a product? So are there products inside products? A chair, is a chair a product? Is the seat a product in itself? And so based on this one here, you can basically define what the product is as a big thing or many small things, depending on how you do it.
Yeah,
the product goal
has to be a physical product. It could also be an online product or whatever. Or you mentioned Spotify the other day. We talked about this, where Henrik Nieberg works as a Scrum coach, where they do different products. So is a list of songs, is that a product, or is it something bigger?
Yeah, and that's what you see in the different scaling frameworks there are. There are different approaches to it. So if you look at Scrum at Scale, which is Jeff Sutherland's, you will see they try to do very small products. So basically you have one Scrum team has one product. They try to break down the products into many products. And then if you have something like Less or Nexus, and they go more for having up to 8 teams working on the same product backlog. And there are pros and cons of both of them. And but this basically says that, what is a product, and you can define it as a large thing or a small thing. Product goal, that's a new thing from the 2017 Scrum Guide. It used to say that you had a vision. Now you have a product goal. And so what's the difference here? Well, Stig and I have discussed that. So the product goal, I feel, is a more open. So vision would be a technique to make a product goal. But there would be other ways of doing a product goal also. A friend of mine, Jim Coplien, some of you might know him, he uses the expression desired state, which probably is even better than the word product goal. So this product has a desired state out there in the future. So, but you don't have to do a vision anymore. You have to do a product goal. So the product goal then becomes, so to speak, the approach you have to follow. You have to reach the product goal. And the way to do that is through the product backlog. Anything else, Stig?
I think the product goal is a long-term commitment. So that's one of the focus areas in the 2020 Scrum Guides, to have a long-term commitment. They don't define anything about how long is long. Is it half a year? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? So it's up to the Scrum team actually to define the product goal to consist of the backlog items. So what are they developing, or what are the value they are bringing with the product goal?
Yeah, and each sprint goal should also be connected to the product goal. So when you do a sprint goal, it should have some connection to the product goal.
So you can only have one product goal, and you have to accomplish that product goal or abandon it. So either or. So you can work on a product goal for a year and then suddenly decide that this is no longer valid. Let's abandon this product goal and make a new product goal and pursue that. But you cannot have 2 product goals at the same time.
Okay.
So the team in Scrum, it defines it in 2017 as a Scrum team with a product owner, a development team, and a Scrum Master. And it's prescriptive regarding the size 3 to 9. In 2020, the Scrum team, it's still the same name, the Scrum team, but it now consists of one Scrum Master, one product owner, and developers. So there's no team within a team. This is a united team. The Scrum team is united as a whole, as one. So there's no development team in the 2020 Scrum Guide. And what's the difference here? So development team, you could argue, is consisting of developers, but now they only focus on developers. Actually, in 2020 guide, you can have the Scrum Master or the product owner or both joining as developers if they do work from the sprint backlog. So that's also new. The team size is less prescriptive in the new guide. They say 10 or maybe less for the Scrum team size, and the old team size was the development team size, 3 to 9. And we also know, and my experience is that smaller team are much more efficient. They communicate better. So you smaller, the better. But you have to have a large enough team so you can actually deliver value within the sprint. Anything
yes, and go ahead, Stig.
Anything to add, Jens? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, a Harvard business study shows that 4.6 people is the ideal team size. So we usually say 5 or 4 or 5. And that's when it's easiest for everybody to know what everybody is doing. If you get up to the higher numbers like 10 or so on, it gets hard for everybody to know what everybody is doing. So it's harder to feel responsible for everything. So this is, I think this is a big change, because this puts on the both for the Scrum Master and the product owner to be much more active in the sprint, working with the team. No, not the team. Sorry, developers. It's not called team anymore. Developers to also participate in the sprint. So you might, and they're even encouraging somehow also in the Scrum Guide that you actually, product owner and Scrum Masters, whatever the team needs during the sprint, the product owner, Scrum Master also commits to the sprint to help in any way they can. And this, I just read this morning, I think it reminds me of the old extreme programming practice that you have a customer on site, which was always the thinking that the customer should be part of the whole team and do, for instance, doing functional tests while the team is still developing. So for product owners, this is a big change. They're no longer living on their separate island, so to speak, because as Jeff and Ken explained this, it's that it was very often it became us and them. So that you have us in IT and them in business, or vice versa. It's us in business in form of the product owner, and it's them in IT in form of the team, in form of the development. So this is, I think this is a big change, that you kind of have to feel like a Scrum team. And we're all in this together as a Scrum team to reach the product goal. Everybody has to help on that.
And my experience, we're talking about the team size, 4 to 6. I'm much more happier with smaller team sizes, like 3 or 4, because they communicate so much better and are so much quicker in delivering value to a sprint. Well, that's my opinion. Okay. So the Scrum team is accountable. The entire Scrum team is accountable for creating valuable, useful increment every sprint. And Scrum defines 3 specific accountabilities within the Scrum team. So they are not talking about roles. And also they talk about roles, because the developers, the product owners, and the Scrum Master is the old roles. The developers used to be a Scrum development team. Now they're only developers. But the new part here is the accountabilities. So what are developers accountable for? What are product owner accountable for? What are the Scrum Master accountable for? That's a new part. So the word accountabilities is written on top of the Scrum team. So the difference here is, what do the Scrum Master do? And there's quite some change also to the Scrum Master. Let's look into that. Jeff, not Jeff, Jens, any comments?
No, I think I agree with everything you say.
You wear black shirt like Jeff, so I misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah, he always has a black shirt. Yeah, you're right. But anyway, yeah, basically you changed the role definition to accountabilities instead, because when you had to, the role was to do this and this and this. It was siloing more things. Now it says you're accountable. So you're accountable for doing. If you're accountable for doing something, that means you can also let somebody else do it. So it's basically like the CEO is accountable for an organization to let other make decisions. So same thing here. The product owner is accountable for the product owner creates the product goal. What it means is that they're accountable that it is correct, the product goal. So I think that's a good change. I think it's a really good change.
I agree.
Moving on.
So another change in the 2020 Scrum Guide is self-organizing versus self-managing. And you could argue that it's almost the same, but there's a small different part in the definition. So the self-managing Scrum team choose who, how, and what to work on. And the old guide, it's only stated who and how to work, not what. But so self-managing is a much more what do you say? The wording, I don't know. Much more commitment to the Scrum team. They are managing their own team, not just self-organizing, choosing how to work and who to work in the Scrum team. So there's a much more self-contained and self-managing in the new Scrum Guide.
Yes, that's also what I've heard, and I also heard somebody misuse the self-organizing. And one more reason why they changed is that people said they were self-organizing. They just choose whatever they wanted to work on, and as developers. So self-managing takes a more tough approach, that the Scrum team choose who, how, and what to work on. So this is where the whole Scrum team can choose that. The product owner, you got to help us out in the team. Scrum Master, please do some content integration. We need help here. So if you have time, you got to help us here in the sprint. So that's, again, it comes back to the Scrum team and kind of letting go to the development team and getting the Scrum team to be more responsible in the sprint.
So the Scrum team is self-managing, so they will decide how to and when and how and what to deliver value within a sprint. So that's the self-managing part, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's how I understand it also.
Okay. So the Scrum Master, there's also some changes. You could argue that it's just words, but let's look at the words. The Scrum Master in 2017 was responsible for promoting and supporting Scrum, as defined in the Scrum Guide. In 2020, it's accountable for establishing Scrum. So not just responsible for promoting, but now accountable for establishing Scrum, which is a big part. And the next one is changed from servant leader to the Scrum team to be true leaders who serve both the Scrum team and the larger organization. So the Scrum Master, in my opinion here, is more like a organizational coach, actually accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide, both for the team and for the organization, if you take it that wide. Whereas in the old days, it was only servant leader for the team, like a secretary, which was quite misunderstood also. Jens?
Yeah, I fully agree, Stig. It's that it gives the Scrum Master has to work harder on implementing Scrum as it's supposed to be in the organization, because they're now accountable to make sure we follow the rules of Scrum in the organization. So it's tougher, riskier at the same time.
And not only, should I say, accountable for establishing Scrum, but also for the Scrum team's effectiveness, which also is a little bit new, I think. So as a Scrum Master, you need to actually work on how to make this team do more value in a sprint, work better, inspect and adapt, and talk to the whole team. The Scrum Master will talk to both the product owner and the developers to make a better team.
Plus, as we said before, the Scrum Masters also you have to, or they can, I should say, they don't have to. They can do development work in the sprint. As I said, content integration or whatever, content management, integrating, testing, whatever. They have to help in any way.
So my experience with the Scrum Master in our organization is that they are developers. So they're part-time Scrum Masters and part-time developers. So they can flip their hats and say, today I'm going to be a developer, and tomorrow I'll do the parts, the role, or the accountabilities as a Scrum Master. And that's an easy change, whereas the product owner typically will not be a developer in our organization. It'll more be like a business unit, as Jens discussed earlier.
Okay.
So we also talked about the mixing roles. They could work on a sprint backlog, but they have to be working as developer. So they changed the hat, which is also new. I think it's in 2017 you could also help the development team if they are in need. But now it's clearly defined as a product owner or Scrum Master. You can actually be working on a sprint backlog, but as a developer. So there's a mixing of roles, and I don't think there's any prescription of which roles you could have. In the old days, you couldn't be both the Scrum Master and the product owner at the same time because you are pulling in different directions. But now it's not as clearly defined as it was. So they have different accountabilities in the team instead.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I also see this as a maturity of Scrum being implemented around the world, being more and more accepted, in the sense that, because it used to be very tough with the product owner couldn't even be at the daily Scrum or say anything at the daily Scrum, but it has loosened up more as Scrum has matured in organization. You have to think it started out as a grassroots movement in IT. And the business wasn't on board at all at first. So that's why you didn't want to have the product owners close to the team or in the daily meeting or anything like that, or daily Scrum, I should say. Okay, moving on to the next one. The daily Scrum. The 3 questions are now out of the Scrum Guide. The 3 questions that we call the round robin. And I think that's a good thing. They're completely out now, and that because the questions has been there for many years, and it has developed over the years. So it used to be you would say, I did this, I'm going to do this, I have these problems. Then it developed into yesterday I helped the team by, today I will help the team by, I'm blocked from helping the team by. Putting focus on that you as a developer, you're really working for the team, not for yourself. So some different techniques I've seen in daily Scrum is you have the round robin, that's the 3 questions. You have walk the wall, which you can go out and read more about. It's basically where you take the product backlog items and you talk about them and who has been working on what, or the tasks if you've broken them down into tasks. I also know a coach that actually the only question during the daily Scrum, why isn't the top story finished? So trying to encourage people to work on the same story, the highest prioritized product backlog item that's not done. Why is it not done? So what's blocking that from being finished? So again, opening up, as we said before, less prescriptive. I think it's gone from, correct me if I'm wrong, Stig, is it from 18 to 13 pages, the Scrum Guide?
Yeah.
So, much less prescriptive. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just like the Scrum team as a self-managing team will do whatever they fit best into their hands to actually make a plan for the next day. That's the daily Scrum. So which technique they use, it's up to them. As long as they deliver a plan for the next day.
Yeah, there's been too much focus on the round robin questions before. But as Stig says, the purpose is to synchronize. What are we going to do the next 24 hours to get closer to the sprint goal? That's what it is. I think we've all done this wrong. Even starting as a status meeting in the beginning. The sprint review. Sprint review was quite prescriptive in the 2017. They've loosened up a lot here. In 2007, it was led by the product owner. So the product owner would start up by saying, by identifying which product backlog items are done and which not done. And then they would go through different things. Now in 2020, it's led by the Scrum team. It's the Scrum team who decides how we're going to do this. So the whole Scrum team presents it to stakeholders. Which is a new thing also. In 2017, it was the product owner who decided who should we invite outside of the Scrum team. So for now, it's presented for stakeholders and customers and who else might need to see the sprint review. So much less prescriptive. It doesn't say anything about techniques now. Anything you want to add, Stig?
No.
The product backlog. We've always talked about the what and the how for many years. So the what would be the product backlog and the how would be the sprint backlog. Now, in the latest version of the Scrum Guide, they added the why also. So for the product backlog, the why for the product backlog is the product goal. So the product backlog's job is to fulfill the product goal with the product backlog items they have in the product backlog. Anything, Stig?
Nope.
Moving on to the sprint backlog. Sprint backlog, which has both the why, the what, and the how. So here we have also the why has added, they kind of connected them because the sprint goal was there before also, and the product backlog and the sprint backlog. So, but now they kind of put them in how do they relate to each other. So the why in the sprint backlog is obviously then the sprint goal. The what is the product backlog. The product backlog items that are selected for the sprint. And the how, that's the plan for how to deliver the increment. So all these three things is part of the sprint backlog. It's not like the how is the only thing of the sprint backlog. All three things here are part of the sprint backlog.
So the sprint backlog consists of the product backlog items selected for the sprint, but the sprint goal is non-negotiable, whereas the product backlog items can be changed during the sprint, as long as you have focus on the sprint goal. So this is the main value you deliver, a product increment adhering to the sprint goal. And whatever product backlog items comes in during the sprint, it's okay as long as it doesn't conflict with the sprint goal.
Yep. The product increment. and this, I think there have been misunderstandings about this for many years now. So they clarify this in the 2020 Scrum Guide. So this is the definition of a product increment now. The moment a product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born. And what I see when I talk to people about Scrum, most people have the definition of done. That means the product owner has accepted it. But that's the wrong interpretation. This is the correct interpretation. It means it's ready to be reviewed. So I think this is very important. The moment a product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born. And then some people say they accept this and have accepted this. They call this done. And some people say that when the product backlog, if the product owner has accepted it, they will call it done. And then when it's in production, they call it done. But the only definition in the Scrum Guide is the definition of done. And that, as I said, when the increment is born, when a product backlog item meets the definition of done. So this is I really like this clarification.
And also it focuses on quality criteria for the product increment. In the old guide, there was a last description of the definition of done. If you had one for the organization, you could use that. If you have multiple teams, do they have to have the same definition of done or whatever? So this is much less prescriptive as the whole Scrum Guide 2020 is. A clear definition of definition of done instead.
Excellent. So what's next? Well, you can download and read the Scrum Guide here. We will send you the presentation. So scrumguides.org, that's where it's the official site of the Scrum Guide. And you can also watch Ken and Jeff discuss the things we have discussed slightly different there also.